Welcome to The Real Deal, where it's all about real estate and related businesses in central Massachusetts and northeastern Connecticut. And now, your host, Anthony Chabot of Chabot & Associates.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the Real Deal Business Podcast. My name is Anthony Chabot, and I'm from Chabot & Associates Real Estate Group of EXP. And on today's show, we have a guest that I am very excited about. His name is Jim Bellano, and he is the Economic Development Director for the town of Windham, Connecticut. Welcome to the podcast, Jim.
Tony, thanks for having me on.
So we're going to talk about some interesting things, get a little bit of a background about Jim and what he's done throughout his career, where he's from, and his contact information. And we're going to learn a lot of interesting things about economic development and some of the things that go on in northeastern Connecticut, the way things are done. And he's going to talk about a lot of topics that I think of people from local towns in northeastern Connecticut and other areas are going to find very interesting. So let's get into your background, Jim. Where did you grow up, and where'd you go to school, and that type of thing?
Sure. So originally I'm from Yonkers, New York, just outside of the city, lower part of Westchester County. Grew up there, lived there my whole life, lived in Mount Kisco for a while, and then in '95 moved to Brookfield, Connecticut. And I stayed out in western Connecticut in the Danbury area up until about 5 years ago when I moved out to eastern Connecticut for the town of Windham. My schooling is, I'm a state university kid from SUNY Oneonta. Did a master's because I was a history major, and I always thought I wanted to teach at a college, which I did for quite a long time. I adjuncted at Western Connecticut State for over 10 years. But and then decided to get a law degree and practiced law in New York. I was still living in New York, and when I moved to Connecticut, and so I practiced law for about 8 or 9 years. And I remember I graduated right around the time of the first real estate meltdown, late 80s, early 90s. And of course, I was a real estate attorney and walked right into it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so never really made a lot of money in that. And quite frankly, as kind of a history poli-sci person, I always had this interest in government, but I liked law and I liked business. And so this opportunity in Danbury, the greater Danbury area, came around for an economic development director back in 2000. And in 2000, I took the job. I was the regional economic development director for the greater Danbury region. It was known as the Housatonic Valley at the time. And I spent about 4 years there. And then the city of Danbury created their own department. And I went to work for Mark Batten for a couple of years in the early 2000s. And that's really where I got my economic development experience. Shortly thereafter, I took a bit of a hiatus and went into private development. Went to work for a private developer in Danbury who had a very mixed portfolio, pharmaceutical, commercial, residential, government offices and things like that. Had properties out in Santa Fe and Delaware. So I learned a lot off that and kind of made a lot of connections with ICSC. I don't know if you know that organization. Yeah. So in any event, I kind of ran a string there for about 8 years and then really wanted to get back in economic development. I really felt that was my niche and what I loved. And I saw this opportunity in Windham, and I applied and took it, and 5 years ago ended up out here. And I saw Windham and Willimantic, and I saw a lot of parallels to Danbury. They both had a state university. They both had this historic downtown. They were old manufacturing and mill towns. Mm-hmm. So I thought I could apply a lot from Danbury here. Now, Danbury's in Fairfield County. It's got 84 running right through it, so it's got a little bit more of assets than maybe we have out here. But there's a lot of similarities, and that's where I've been for the last 5 years.
Very interesting. So 5 years as Economic Development Director in the town of Windham, Connecticut, which is, so if we're looking at a map, we have Worcester to our north, we have Providence to our east, Hartford to our west, and New London to our south. And Windham is approximately, I would say, 25 minutes from Putnam, which is where I'm from, just to give an idea of the location. And Main Street in Windham is sometimes referred to as Willimantic. What are your thoughts on that? Is it the Willimantic? What are your thoughts on like the definition of Willimantic? I know sometimes people have different opinions on that.
Yeah, so it's interesting. It's interesting you brought that up, and you're absolutely right. So you just named this kind of cross: Worcester, New London, Providence, Hartford. So we'd be in the center of that cross, right where the two crosses hit, the intersection. So Willimantic was a city on its own for many years, and that was the thread city, as it's known. It was the thread capital of the world, manufacturing. Mm-hmm. And Windham is the larger town, much more bucolic and rural, suburban even. And in the mid-'80s, the two municipalities decided to merge into the town of Windham. So Willimantic does not exist except for street signs, and it's a taxing district, and it exists from its history. So we undertook a 5-year marketing and branding campaign recently. Mm-hmm. You may have seen some of our commercials running on the air. And so in doing so, we want to highlight the history of Willimantic, but we do want to emphasize the fact that we're Windham. And our tagline is really one community, endless opportunities. So we're not disassociating ourselves from Willimantic, but we do want to brand Windham as the town and then highlight Willimantic as, given its historic past. But you're right. I've even written to television stations when they do the weather and say, you got Willimantic up there. Do you know the town is Windham? And some of them have actually made the change.
Wow. Yeah, that's very interesting. I find things like that. So it's a little bit of the town, or Willimantic by itself doesn't exist anymore officially, technically. It's basically just referencing the old city, which is now Windham.
True, right.
Wow, very interesting.
And Windham's larger. Windham goes, it borders Chaplin and Scotland, Columbia and Lebanon and Coventry also, and Mansfield.
Very interesting. Okay, so what are some of the projects that you've worked on that you like to... that you think are some of the more notable things that you've been associated with? You referenced that you worked with a developer and with pharmaceuticals. You're talking about, when you say developer, he was building commercial buildings?
That was Danbury. That was my guy in Danbury.
Mm-hmm.
But so since I've been here, one of the things we've noticed, and I think it's a function of, when you hit bottom, there's only one place to go but up. And so what I've seen here, we've seen a lot of investment. And in many ways, Willimantic, and of course, from whether it was, the loss of manufacturing jobs, we want to carry that forward to the economic, dips and troughs over the decades. Willimantic and Windham did kind of hit bottom. Values were low, jobs left the area. But I think people eventually saw an opportunity, and prices were low. So I can go through a list of half a dozen retail, other commercial, manufacturing sites that have been purchased, and these are sites that were empty for many years and just sat there, and now they've been purchased. A lot of investment has been put into them, millions of dollars all around, and now they're back online. So there was a manufacturing building up in North Windham. A manufacturer from downtown Willimantic bought the building and expanded their operations. We had an old Sears building, and we know the story of Sears nationwide. They've gotten out of their stores a lot. That was taken over by a roofing contractor. Mm-hmm. You're talking about a 50,000 square foot building. An old bowling alley was taken over by Harbor Freight. A really bad shopping center, meaning bad, decayed over time in the center of Main Street, was taken over by folks you probably know from Northeast Retail Development, George Lee, that group there. And they put Planet Fitness in as an anchor, Evelyn's, Moe's, moved the Dollar Tree across the street, and that place has come back to life. And they just flipped it over after about 2 years. So I can go on and on about this outside investment and people building bottom up. Now, I can tell you also, some people in town, my job is to attract businesses in here and grow the tax base, one of the jobs. So, quite frankly, with few exceptions, I don't really care what they're doing. If somebody's buying a dead building, putting $1 million into it and bringing something to life, it's good, I think.
Right.
But, we have a lot of dollar stores. We have a lot of auto parts stores in here in town. And people say, gee, isn't that enough of that? But my take is if a national tenant is going to make that investment, who am I to tell them? They've done the market research. So I'm happy about it. And it has contributed to the tax base. I think last reval, a year ago, our commercial property values were up something like 14%.
Wow.
On the commercial side. So yeah, so that's been a big plus for the town.
Yeah, that's one thing I was going to get into was the job responsibilities of the economic development director, because a lot of people might think, what does an economic development director do? And a lot of people might not know the answer to that. But in general, I think there's a lot more to it than what meets the eye from a outsider perspective that doesn't really understand what it involves. So maybe you could give us an overview of some of the things that you have to do.
Sure. So maybe the best description of it is we kind of try and act as a hub of the wheel, and so we're the hub, and the spokes shoot out, and those spokes are varied. It could be dealing with the State Department of Economic and Community Development on some loan program or business assistance program they have. It might be working with our own town departments, building department. Somebody's putting a new building up. They got to get through building. They got to get through code. They've got to get through fire marshal. If it's a restaurant, they got to get through health. Mm-hmm. And so we act as kind of the liaison for all that to try and smooth out some things, because those offices are regulatory offices. Excuse me. And they sometimes act in their own little silo. And so we try and bring them together and maybe have monthly meetings and say, look, how are we doing with O'Reilly Auto Parts? How's the shopping center coming? What do they need? And then we try and work through all that. Obviously, we're concerned about things like infrastructure, water, sewer extensions within the town. Broadband, is it available to businesses? So we're kind of concerned with all that. Mm-hmm. And we also have a very large marketing function. I mentioned this marketing campaign and the commercials we ran. So we try and do a lot with doing more, a lot of social media and putting commercials out and trying to keeping people abreast of what's happening in town. So we try and get press releases out to the press and to the TV stations if something's happening. So it's very multifaceted. And I will say, from talking to my counterparts, different towns approach it different ways. East Hartford may be dealing with more core development, and maybe they're dealing with tax incentives. We've been stressing this marketing for the past year. Other towns may be focusing on different stuff because they have different assets in their town. Mm-hmm. Our assets are development, affordability, the downtown, and things like that. So each economic development director gears their activities towards the town that they're in.
So you also work, because I also talked to Jill St. Clair, which is also known as Jill Fritchie from back when I knew her in Norwich, and Delpha Very from Putnam. And I haven't met any. Those are the two main towns that I work with. I've met Marianne Chinati from Plainfield, right? And I've interviewed her in the past, and I would like to interview more. But you're a really interesting one because Jim Rivers I've interviewed, and that was a great podcast. I really learned a lot from that one. I listened to it multiple times. And the two of you combined are kind of like the dream team at the town of Windham. So you guys have a lot of interesting things going on, and I've been to some meetings in Windham before. You have some pretty heavy hitter developers in the area that are putting a lot of money into the town. I've heard numbers, 25 million, 50 million from one developer. I forgot what, and I believe it's multifamily investment properties as far as I remember. So that's something that I'm really interested in. We're actually going to be having some multifamily investment meetings at my new office in downtown Putnam, and that's one thing I wanted to talk to you about was in Putnam we have this. It's a rehab program that Delpha is actually in charge of or I believe she's the facilitator for it, like you said, the hub, the person that puts people in touch with the people that are in charge of it, something like that. So is there some sort of an incentive program in Windham for multifamily investors to come in? And first, is it an opportunity zone where they can, okay. So maybe you just elaborate.
Yeah, so opportunity zones, the new phenomenon of opportunity zones, where people can defer capital gains at various percentages based on the length of the investment, is based on census tracts. And so our downtown census tract, I think it's 8005, is the opportunity zone. It happens to pretty much overlap with our enterprise zone. Mm-hmm. And I don't think Killingley is anymore, but I think Putnam is in an enterprise zone. Thompson may have one as well. So we do have some incentives there. So the opportunity zone in itself is an incentive for an investor. That's away from the government incentive. That's a federal tax incentive that the investor gets by deferring capital gains, by setting up an opportunity zone fund,
right,
and investing in it. The enterprise zone is what you're talking about for multifamily. And because we're in that, the main incentive in the enterprise zone, and we also have an entertainment district, which also oddly gives a similar incentive, even though it may not have nothing to do with entertainment. That's a 7-year sliding scale deferral of taxes. Mm-hmm. So what I mean, if you have, and this comes in really handy if you have an old vacant building. If you have an old vacant building, hypothetically, that's assessed at $100,000, let's say, mm-hmm. and sitting around. You put $1 million into that building in the enterprise zone. That assessment, barring mill rate changes, is going to stay at $100,000 for 2 years. You're not going to get taxed on any of the improvements. Mm-hmm. And then in year 3 to year 7, you will go up $10,000 a year until in year 8 you're online again. You're online at 100%.
10% a year, right? Is it 10% a year?
10% a year. So it's the first 2 years you get the pass, 100% frozen, 100% frozen. Then you get 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, till you come back online.
That's a great tax incentive. The opportunity zone one I know is a little bit more complicated, and there's all these restrictions and hurdles that you have to jump over, and you kind of need to be like a tax attorney to understand it. So I've tried.
And it's good you say that, because it really is. And I know the state of Connecticut has set up a website. I think they did a good job listing the opportunity zones where you can search by town,
right,
if you're an investor. But really, for the most part, in the opportunity zones, government is on the sidelines. It can supplement, like with an enterprise zone incentive or some other incentive, but really, that's a deal between the federal government, the Department of Treasury, and the IRS, and your capital gains. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of a nice thing about it.
So you have the opportunity zone, the enterprise zone, and then you have, is there a separate one that you guys have called, is it a rehab zone or something? We have a rehab zone in Putnam, I think.
We do have a rehabilitation zone, and so I think it's limited to housing. I don't get many calls on that because I think the enterprise zone and the entertainment district's incentives suffice. But in fact, the entire town is quote unquote a rehabilitation zone. Mm-hmm. So we do have it within the town, and that's a different tax incentive. I don't think it's as generous as the enterprise zone. But I'll also say this: there's another statute, 1265B, which offers up to a 10-year deferral of taxes. Mm-hmm. And so and the town can mold that any way it wants. It could be 100 if the investment is significant enough, like creating jobs, you can get 100% deferral for 10 years.
Wow.
Under that program. Or we can make it 50% for 5 years. You can do whatever you want with that. And that's a very flexible program under 1265B of the general statutes.
These are all things that an economic development director needs to be pretty well versed in because you deal with it on a daily basis. And these are all things that most people have never even heard of. But one thing that I find is interesting is that the overlap of an economic development director and a commercial real estate agent are actually they're actually probably the closest things that I've ever seen. Is surprising, but when you go to an economic development meeting, a lot of things you talk about are commercial real estate. So having a background in commercial real estate is a huge help. You're involved in commercial real estate every day with an economic development, right?
Let me tell you, I rely, and I learned this, I think, from my work in Western Connecticut in development and at ICSC, which I've been a member there for over 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to, and some towns try and do this, and I think it's difficult. You go to some town websites in economic development, and they'll have a listing for vacant properties. Well, they don't always stay vacant, and then you've got the job of updating. And I don't need to do that because I have you and Carolyn Trotta and Dave Machinsky, and I have the whole gang.
Yes, Dave's the guy.
Why would I do your work for you?
Right.
So if I get a requirement, and I don't play favorites, I will shoot it out, and I'll have to add you to the list in case you get a listing here.
Yeah.
If I get somebody asking with a requirement, I shoot it out blind copy them to all the commercial realtors that I deal with in the area or who have listings. And I say, here you go, folks. I don't need to do that. You guys have the properties. I don't own anything.
Right. It's really our job as the local realtors to get in touch with the economic development directors and let them know that what we have available, stay in regular conversation with the economic development directors and see if they have anybody that's looking for property also, which happens a lot. Do you have an industrial park in Windham?
We do. It's actually in an odd spot. It must have been created a long time ago. And we've thought about creating others. But actually it's in North Windham. So we have industrial sites here and there, but there's actually, quote unquote, an industrial park on Route 203 in North Windham before you get to Route 6, almost near the elementary school there. It's actually a very nice park, but it's about 6 or 7 buildings. They're all fully leased. In fact, we just got somebody from Andover, a guy that does precision assembly work for Pratt & Whitney.
Oh, wow.
Was working out of his garage and got so successful he came over here and moved into the park about a year or so ago.
Well, that kind of leads me into the next thing, which is one of the major things I wanted to talk to you about today, which is the parking garage project that you have going on in Windham. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So this is an old story that has kind of a new twist to it. So apparently, well before my time, maybe as far back as 20 years ago, they've been debating a parking garage downtown. Over that time, there were 2 parking studies done. Nobody could pull the trigger. Then about maybe 10 or 12 years ago, Don Williams, who was our state senator, was president of the Senate, put a bill in and got money authorized for an intermodal transportation center. I think you get more legislative action if you call it that than a parking garage. Got it passed. But then again, it sat there. We even had the plans from a U.S. DOT grant, $600,000 to develop the design plans.
Wow. But
it sat. And it's funny you mentioned when Jim Rivers got here. So I was pushing this. Jim Rivers got here. We really doubled up the effort on it. We got May Flexer and Susan Johnson, our state rep and state senator, to go to the bond commission and really push hard on it. And in the waning days of the Malloy administration, we got a $6 million allocation from the bond commission. Now it's a $12 million project, so the town had to bond the rest. But we did it, and we broke ground on it. I think it was October 3rd.
Wow.
So that's a long story that finally came to fruition over many years of fighting. It's about 295 spaces. Because we're taking the police department's parking lot, we're going to dedicate 44 of those spaces to emergency vehicles, police vehicles, and the rest is for the public.
Oh, interesting. So you actually teamed up with the police department to house their fleet. And what about the fire department is not part of that, right? Or emergency or anything?
I'm not sure. I think the fire department is adjacent to the police department. They probably have their own parking. They may have 1 or 2 vehicles that's included under this ambit of emergency vehicles.
That is very interesting. Okay. Yeah. And so let me pull up the renderings. Is that okay for me to share the screen now? Okay, I'm going to share the screen. Let's see. Here we go. I'm going to share. All right, and let's see if this works. Yep. So this is the parking garage that we're looking at right here. Is that right?
Right. So you're seeing a 4-story structure. I think the top level actually has another half level there if you look at the top. But that's it. So it's right on. It's going on Walnut and Meadow, which is really, there's actually a surface public parking lot there. And it's right next to the police station. So this is the view from where your arrow is. If you move your arrow to your right just to drop, that's roughly the police station.
Okay.
And so the road is pointing out towards Main Street.
Okay, I'll keep scrolling here. You tell me if you want me to stop at any.
There's your overhead. Yeah.
So what's this street right here? Can you see my arrow going back?
Yeah, that's Walnut Street.
Okay, and then what's this street on this side?
That's Meadow, and so that L-shaped building around where the arrow is heading to is the police and fire complex.
Okay, and let me keep scrolling here. Oh, that looks like a beautiful parking garage, actually. How many cars total are going to fit in there?
295, and then about 250 for the public.
Wow. Okay, great. And let's see if we have any. Oh, look at that. Let me see.
Take a look at So take a look at that. Actually, go down. So the original ones, the earlier ones were kind of a bare facade. This is the actual facade that's going on. It's going to be kind of more tuned with a historic downtown. So it will have this quote-unquote historic facade on it.
Oh, that's awesome. I really like that.
Yeah.
So
to the character of the downtown.
Oh, wow. That looks great. Very nice. So the total cost is $12 million, and you have $6 million from the federal government. Is that right?
The state.
The state. Oh, okay. Let me switch. Actually, I'm going to pull up one more thing right here. I'm going to pull up. And just
so I can say, beyond the parking garage, it really is an intermodal transportation center. We'll have opportunity for bicycles there. But really, WRTD, which is our transit district, is going to put an office and it's going to be their downtown hub for Windham and the area. And the Eastern Connecticut University Shuttle is also going to utilize the site, as will Peter Pan, which runs a bus to Manchester, Hartford every day. So it really will be intermodal. All 3 bus lines will utilize the center.
And you said Walnut. Let me look here. I'm trying to pull it up on the map. Police.
Yeah, Walnut. So you have to go the other way. So you see where Dairy Queen is on the bottom? You have to go east.
Okay, we're going east. Gilson Square.
Not too far now. Come back west.
Okay.
Once you zoom in there, we'll find it.
Right.
So you see where Grounded Coffee Company is?
Let's see. Grounded.
To the left there, it says Grounded Coffee. That's Walnut Street there to the left. You see it?
Okay, I do see Walnut Street. Yep.
So come down a little bit. So there it is right there. You
Walnut
see
Meadow.
Police and fire?
Okay, got it.
It's the empty lot right next to it.
Okay, so it's right here.
Right there, and you see the lot where the police station is too. It's there too.
Okay. Yes, I do see it. Yeah.
So it's that whole rectangle.
This whole thing right here.
It's the certain. Yeah. Well, not counting the buildings. Yes, but yes.
Wow. Okay. Great. Very interesting. So, one thing I heard about parking garages, or are you calling it an intermodal?
It's an intermodal transportation system. Is the official name. Most people will call it the parking garage because that's what it is.
Do you know offhand if they had to insure it as a fuel storage facility? Because that's one thing I've heard is that the insurance is really high on it because you're storing so many vehicles and they have so much fuel. I thought that was an interesting thing somebody mentioned to me.
I'm not sure if that's the case. If so, the town would have done it. The town carries probably a number of policies like that. I don't think that would be a problem for the town. It's probably a question I could ask for you if you want. I should also point out to you. So you see where Grounded Coffee is?
Yeah, right here. Yeah, got it.
The street. To the right of that, there's 2 all the way to the corner of Bank Street. You see 2 older buildings that form an inverted L.
Mm-hmm.
Those 2 buildings are a project for a developer. It's the old Hale and Hooker buildings.
Yep.
Somebody's going to come in there, raise the Hooker building, refurbish the Hale, and they're going to do 107 student housing units.
Wow.
With commercial on the bottom. Now he's gotten held up a little bit because of COVID, because the schools went home and they're going back home we understand, come Thanksgiving. So his project's been slowed down a little bit. And I can tell you, we got held up for about 6 months early on. We had to do battle with the State Historic Preservation Office and some locals who wanted to save the Hooker Hotel.
Mm-hmm.
But in the end of the day, we worked that out with the Attorney General.
And here's everybody's favorite place, Willimantic Brewing Company right there.
There you go.
Everybody loves that place. And Cafe Mantic, I keep hearing great things about. I think I stopped in there before, but it hasn't been very often.
You see, Cafe Mantic has rebranded itself. It's now called Stone Row.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, anyway, that's the name of it now. But it's still just as good.
Very interesting. Okay, so I'll get rid of this screen. Did you want to show anything else while we have the Google Maps up?
No, if you could zoom in on that Hooker and Hale.
Yes.
On the bank in Main Street and just kind of give us a 3D on it, you can see in what bad shape that Hooker was. And it really was kind of a ground zero for crime. And, the old days of Willimantic being called Heroin Town from the early 2000s.
Yep.
We've worked hard to shed that reputation. And so that was kind of our argument, that building may be historically old, date-wise,
mm-hmm.
but really the historic value of it has really disappeared. And I think the Attorney General accepted that definition.
Which one was the Hooker building and which one is the bank building? Bank Street?
The Hooker was the yellow,
okay.
And the one to the left of it is the Hale. That used to be an Eastern Connecticut University dorm back in the day. It's been vacant for 20 years if it's been a day.
Do you have any idea how long the police department has been at that location?
That's not an old complex. So that is police and fire in that long building. If you look at it in the two buildings there, that's I would venture to guess it's 20 to 25 years old.
The reason I ask that is because I've had that idea in the past where you take a police station and you put it next to the location that's, like you said, ground zero for crime. And I wonder if it helped. Do you think that was a positive influence on the crime that was happening?
I do. I think it helped. I think the police department has done a heck of a job in town. Rob Rosado just left. Paul Hussey is our new chief. Rob did a great job with kind of community policing, not only policing the community, but engaging the community in policing efforts. And he did a fantastic job. He'll be missed, but we're looking forward to working with Chief Hussey there. He's well qualified for the job. So that's our look at Main Street. We've had some good activity there. We've had some new businesses come in. But, as you know from Putnam and from Killingley, historic Main Streets are a struggle. And so I think we've been fortunate. If you come a little bit east there, you'll see the, I don't know how dated the Google map is, but you'll see Gilson Square.
Yep, that's it right there, I think, right?
So this is not an updated one, but we now have this Chabot stage on there.
I've heard of it, yeah.
You see where that old movie theater is? That's the square building.
Yeah.
That is gone.
Okay.
That's under construction. That's going to be a community and senior center. So all that is under construction. And the Chabot stage has hosted a number of big events as well as small events, but big events with 5,000 people in the crowd. So it's been a great success.
Oh, and you have that park there, too. That's great.
Well, yeah, the park is that's Gilson Square. That's where the Chabot stage is now.
Oh, okay. I thought it was where the old cinema was. Okay, I see.
Yeah. So the town has made some investments. Senior Center, Chabot stage, the parking garage. The town has made infrastructure investments to help support and help, make more attractive the town for investment and business growth.
Yeah, I love the Frog Bridge, by the way. Everybody, how do you not bring up the Frog Bridge as a local point of interest when you're coming into town? So
the town council deserves a lot of credit as well. And when you're spending tax dollars, you take some heat, and they really stepped up to the plate.
So there's one other thing I noticed over here that I thought was kind of interesting is that you have the train tracks over here, and I was wondering if you've heard. This is something that I hear people ask about a lot, and sometimes I try to chime in about it, but I don't know much about it. The railroad. Is there any possibility that they're going to turn the railroad into a commuter rail down the road?
I would say highly unlikely in the short term. You know, the good thing about that railroad, you have two rail lines merging right about where you were before.
Mm-hmm.
So even though they're all owned by New England Central, but you have this merger of Providence and Worcester and Genesee and Wyoming, and they're now owned by the same company, but they converge right there. So there was a federal grant. One time it was called the Tiger Grant. I think it's called something else now. But they increased the ability of the rail lines to carry heavier freight. So back in the day, that was passenger rail. There's a famous picture of Teddy Roosevelt coming into town and getting off at a stop right back there on Riverside Drive.
Mm-hmm.
But I know from my experience, I can tell you this. My experience in Western Connecticut, you know, the New Milford, the Housatonic line used to go from Grand Central up to Cornwall, Connecticut.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been talking about that line becoming passenger rail. They've been talking about connecting Metro North with the Danbury Spur. You know, rail is very, very expensive. And so my quick answer to you is don't hold your breath, but it would be a nice thing.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting out of it too. It would be a nice thing. I think it would help in a lot of ways. It would make a lot more properties a lot more attractive than they currently are if it had it. Because I know in Boston area and our surrounding areas, they always look for places that have the T, access to the T. Another building I find interesting when I was coming into town. It's such a beautiful building. This one right here. This big. I don't know if you can see that, but there's
the mills. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Windham Mills.
Beautiful stone mill. I don't think I've ever seen a mill that's quite. I mean, it is really pretty, and you got a waterfall.
Stone, yeah. So that is a development project which we wish the owner would do a little better in getting that done. As you're looking at it now, the left side, as you turn around, it'll be the right side, is really prime for residential development. And I know Thompson has a mill they've been trying to get developed. I remember talking to Tara up there.
Yeah.
The other side, where it says Department of Children and Families, is office. It could be industrial. There are tenants in there. But the right side is prime for residential. I don't know if you're familiar with the Ponema Lofts.
Oh, yeah, very.
Baltic.
Yeah.
Well, those are amazing. And
yeah.
This project can be similar to that. It's right on the river there.
Very interesting.
And, I wish that developer could get moving a little better on that. But you're right about that building.
Well, that's something I'm actually getting involved with. I know the developer for Ponema Mill fairly well. I've talked to him, met up with him a couple times. Yeah, really interesting guy. He's got a lot going on. If anybody can do it right, it's him. So I know everybody loves him.
He doesn't own this. I wouldn't mind if he took that over.
Yeah, I know. Everybody wants to take over.
I wish that could happen there because it's a prime site. And just to see what happened at Ponema, and you're on the river there. It's exactly the same project, and there's no reason. We're seeing a lot of not only Eastern students, but we have a reasonable amount of UConn students who either because Store Center has gotten very expensive, or because they like a traditional downtown, they're living in Willimantic and Windham. So we have a lot of UConn students down there, mainly the grad students, and that building would be filled in no time if that project took off.
Let me bring this one over here. This is I made this virtual tour for Ponema Mills actually, and so this will give you an idea for the people that are watching this video. Look at this. This is the interior of the mills at Ponema Mills. And you can kind of see it here, but you can't really see it too closely. There's a waterfall back there. It's really pretty. You would never know it's there if you're on the outside of the building. But this virtual tour is pretty cool. You can actually zoom out and rotate around and then you can choose what section you want to look at, which is pretty neat. This is done with a Matterport camera. So you can actually, if anybody's interested in this, you can send me an email or text me or something, and I can send you the link to this if you want to take a look at it. But we'll just click right here into the bedroom. We'll zoom right into there, and there's the master bedroom. And we'll go right over to the window, and we'll take a look through there. So this is what Jim's talking about with this developer that did such an incredible job that everybody is in love with and wants him to take over their projects.
I think he's, for the amount developed, I think he's fully rented over there.
Oh, really? Wow. I know it was 3 phases. I think they had 325 units or something along those lines, right?
Yeah, I don't know if he's done with all 3, but...
Really nice.
I think what he's built out, he has rented. Look at that, great appliances, countertops.
And these, I can't remember how much the rents are over here, but they're so nicely done. I would expect that people are just
They're reasonable rents over there. I don't know about now. If he's fully rented, they may have gone up. But I think a portion of this, because he took federal and state money, I think there's an affordable percentage, affordable percentage aspect to the development.
Right, we just had that one in Putnam. It's $30 million, the Lofts at Cargill Falls, that was done by a different company. But then there's, let's see, I can bring this one back over, I think. Let me try to, I can't exit out of there. Oh, there we go, exit out of full screen and then drag it back.
So
over.
that Mills you were showing before, and this reinforces, it is in both the Opportunity Zone and the Enterprise Zone. So
yeah, right. So
there's federal and state and local incentives there.
So the great thing about the Opportunity Zone, while I'm pulling up the next lofts at Panema Mills apartment, the Opportunity Zone allows people that have capital gains of any sort to invest into any town. It's an Opportunity Zone, or sometimes it's sections of towns, and you can actually take the money from stocks or any sort of profits that you have to pay capital gains taxes on and bring it into a development like this and turn it in. Take the mill that we just looked at. What's the name of that mill, Jim, with the stone?
It's called the Windham Mills.
So you could take the Windham Mills and turn it into something like this, and instead of paying those capital gains taxes, you just invested in a property like this and defer those capital gains taxes. And then what happens is, and this is just somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but whatever it's worth when you buy it compared to whatever it's worth when you eventually sell it, with an Opportunity Zone, as far as I know, they forgive the appreciation, so you don't have to pay taxes on the difference of what it was when you bought it and what it was when you sold it. I hope that's correct. Somebody correct me if I'm incorrect. But I'm pretty sure that's the major attraction of the Opportunity Zones, and there's a time limit on it, and there's a whole bunch of other restrictions, so I have to be careful. So I'm not an expert in that area, so don't sue me if I got it wrong, but something along those.
Financial advisor, right?
Yeah, right. I'm not a financial advisor, right? So, but yeah, I try my best, and I think all of these things are really interesting to learn about. But yeah, it could look like something like this, and you could really get an advantage with that Opportunity Zone and an Enterprise Zone, so you get the tax deferral from the local taxes.
So it's funny. So for your people who listen and watch this podcast, I think kind of the best explanation I've heard for Opportunity Zones is it's like a 1031 exchange, which your viewers should be familiar with, on steroids.
Yes.
So instead of having to find a like-kind property in 18 months and get the taxes deferred until you sell it, this is much more longer term, as is the investment longer term. But you get to defer those capital gains, and that's what everyone wants.
Right, yeah. I actually did a podcast with the guy that's in charge of, or I should say, the primary 1031 exchange intermediary in Massachusetts is called the Exchange Authority. His name's Bob Charlin. Really interesting podcast. Believe it or not, I actually recorded it on my cell phone, and it came out almost, you pretty much couldn't tell the difference between the way that I normally do it with a nice microphone, although we're doing it with Zoom now, so the audio is going to probably be pretty terrible with this one, but at least we'll have the visuals to kind of counterbalance it. But anyway, Bob Charlin from the Exchange Authority was talking about that 1031 exchanges. The interesting thing about the 1031 exchanges, I think you have 45 days to identify a property, 180 days to close on it, but then you can also do a reverse exchange where you actually will buy a property first and then you have 180 days to sell a property. And then basically all those capital gains that come out of the property that you're selling are deferred. You don't have to pay those capital gains until you sell the next property, which you can do another 1031 exchange. And then eventually, when you get to the end, when you're retirement age or older, say you're 80 years old, and you finally snowball this 1031 exchange into like a huge apartment complex on the water in Florida somewhere, and then you pass away, and then your heirs inherit the property, they get what's called the step up in basis, and then they don't pay the taxes either. So you can actually get out of paying those taxes through your entire life, but you have to literally pass away in order for your heirs to inherit the property, and then they receive the step up in basis, and all of those taxes that you accumulated over all of those years they just disappear. But one thing, I don't like to get too political, but I heard that there is a candidate that's trying to do away with both 1031 exchanges and the step up in basis. So that's a pretty important thing for commercial real investors and realtors to know about. But I don't know if it would ever actually happen. It's just something to keep in the back of your mind, that they're actually trying to make it happen at some level. And I think you might be exempt from it if you make under $400,000 a year or under $1 million a year. But there's another one of those things where there's 100 different details that I don't understand. So it's like anything. The more you get into it, the more you realize you don't understand a lot. You think you understand a lot until you get into it. and then you realize all the things you don't understand, and you're like, wow, I'm really a newbie on this stuff, and I thought I was pretty good at it, but I'm not. So, all right, well, now that we've confused everybody, I'll get rid of this screen here, and we'll go back to us again. Let's see, I'm going to stop sharing this screen. All right, there you go. It's always fun. So I love doing the Google Maps because you can show things that people would never understand where it is, what we're talking about, but now they understand. And they understand a couple of the other mills that we're talking about, and now they understand what Panema Mills looks like, why people love it so much. So before we finish up, there's a couple things I always like to ask in the podcast, if possible. The first thing I like to ask is, if you're looking back at your career and all the things that you've done, is there anything that you think that you wish you would have known a long time ago that could have helped you progress your career more quickly, or something that you wish you would have done differently?
Sure. It's funny. We were talking about 1031 exchanges, and it's information you picked up over time, or actually handled a couple of deals back in my attorney days. But it's funny, when I got out of law school, I really liked at the time tax law. For some reason.
Wow.
It's funny. I'm not kind of my sister was a CPA. I'm not a CPA type. I like tax law, though. And if I could do it over again, I would have stayed for another year and got an LLM in taxation. But that would have taken me on a completely different path than I ended up getting on. That might be one thing. And man, I think we could all think about dozens of things we would have done differently. But they're not for this podcast.
Right. I would have gotten into real estate back when I was 21.
There you go.
Yeah. Instead of waiting until, I've only had my license for 3 years now. So it's been a lot of learning in 3 years. But I've been in the industry, around the industry since 2005. But that's what I would have done, is I would have changed. I would have gotten into real estate when I was 21.
And we all would have bought Google. No, we all would have bought Google in 2000 or 1990.
Oh, yeah, Google, Intel, Microsoft, and now Tesla, maybe, seems. I don't know. We'll see. I guess we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't have a lot. I mean, one of the things I think most people should do is that, kind of life takes you on this path, and you really can't look back. It's really, it's futile to look back. You look forward and see what you had, and most things are good for most people. There's a lot of people, especially during COVID, who have some really tough things going on. So, always be thankful.
Oh, definitely. I'm very, very thankful, appreciative every day. What do you think about that parking garage estimated completion? When do you think it's going to be completely done?
We are told mid-July of 21.
Wow, that's pretty quick. They move quick on stuff like this now.
It's prefab, so it's going to come in pieces, and they just put like a puzzle. They put it together.
I couldn't believe how quickly they moved on the lofts at Cargill Falls Mill. 82 units, 30,000 square feet of commercial space, and I think from the time they really got started, it seemed like it was about a year and a half, I think, until they were completed, which is incredible. $30 million project.
How many units is that?
82 units and 30,000 square feet of commercial space, approximately. Don't quote me on it, but walking distance to downtown. You can literally. Oh, and here's the best part about it: they rented out 75 of the 82 units in 4 months.
Wow.
Goes to show you the demand for housing. You can't get an apartment you look on Zillow or Realtor.com, there are literally no apartments available in downtown Putnam area, or anywhere in Putnam actually. They usually they are booked before they even ever hit the market. Same thing with houses. We have no inventory for houses right now. It's crazy.
Well, let's share this with the guy from the Windham Mills.
Oh, definitely. And there's
get his apartments going.
So the things that you're looking forward to, the parking garage is going to be a major development in Windham. And then what are some other things that you have on the horizon? Can you think of?
So, I mean, again, a lot of things have been ongoing, like the shopping centers and the old buildings coming back online. But the downtown development I talked about, the old Hooker and Hale buildings, that person also bought another 2 buildings. He's actually looking to do a total of 400 units. When that project is done and online, Windham and downtown Willimantic will be transformed. You know, it had its golden age when the mills were functioning in the Victorian age. That's the golden age of Willimantic. It'll be another golden age that'll last 100 years. It's historically transformative for Main Street.
That's
that
excellent.
Project gets going.
Oh, one other thing we should mention, that you're involved with the Eastern Connecticut Tourism Council, right? Is that the correct name of the organization?
Well, the district is the Eastern Connecticut Tourism District, and we have a 41-member board, 1 member from each of the towns in Eastern Connecticut. So yes, close enough.
And what is your position with that organization?
I'm the chair of the board of the district.
And you have a lot of other economic development directors that are on that board, which is nice to get the information out to everybody, which is necessary in our area to use that marketing funds and grants. And yeah,
Tara Penn from Thompson, Delphi, Jill, Jason Vincent down in Norwich, myself, and a few others.
Jason is the economic development director?
Well, he works for the NCDC.
NCDC in Norwich, right?
Yeah. So I think they're basically the economic development arm for the city of Norwich.
Oh, wow. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I know Jason. He's a great guy. I haven't met Tara yet in Thompson.
Smart guy.
Yeah, Jason.
Tara's a very smart woman. She's actually the planner there, but she's kind of inherited an economic development role. She's great to work with, very smart. And, you know, sometimes planners tend to be more strategic in their thinking, long-term. Economic development people tend to be more tactical and mobile, and Tara is kind of both, and so she can do both those jobs. Sometimes it's not a great job for a planner to do economic development. Sometimes it is. I don't want to insult anyone.
Very interesting. Another question that I always ask before we wrap it up. Do you have any advice for somebody that's just coming into, maybe they're interested in learning about economic development, maybe they want to be the economic development director, some careers that they might take along their way that would help them to understand better how to do their job when they eventually get the position as economic development director?
Sure. I think, you know, from an actual educational perspective, there's an organization called CEDAS, Connecticut Economic Development Association, which we're all members of as economic development professionals. If you were a student, for example, I think you could join and attend that organization for free. And there actually is a certification in it. As an older guy, I'm not that high on going back and getting the certification because I've done the job for 20 years. But there is an economic development certification through an organization called IEDC, International Economic Development Council.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are in real estate, I think you have a really good heads up on economic development, because you were right when you said it early on. We deal with commercial realty. Yes, there's housing is involved, but the housing involved is usually tied to downtowns and kind of large developments. So real estate's a great background, law is a great background, you know, government administration is a good background. You really need to be multifaceted. So the more exposure you have to different things, even creative, you know, a marketing person.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, realtors have to be marketing people. I see you guys, you put your own flyers out, you do your own social media, you do your own promotion. Real estate guys and people that do marketing really have some good basis to get into economic development. and they know the nuts and bolts. They know about taxes. They know about tax incentives. Or they're smart enough to know the people to go to answer the question.
Right. Well, it's been an honor to have you on the podcast, Jim. You're highly regarded as an expert in your industry, and people have nothing but great things to say about you and your experience and what you bring to the table. So I just want to say thank you so much for being on the podcast, and I look forward to meeting with you in the future in all of our different endeavors that we cross paths in. And how can people get in touch with you? Actually, that's one of the things I should have said in the beginning of the podcast. Phone number, email address, web address.
Sure. So the phone number to my office is 860-465-3062. Email address is jbellano, JBELLANO, at Windham with an H, WINDHAMCT.com. And we can take it from there. We have a Facebook page I can direct you to. Windham, the town of Windham has a website, and we have an economic development page with resources. In about a week, we're going to be launching a new web portal, which I could have showed you and told you about if it was a week from now. But contact me by phone or by email, and I can talk more about things and share things with you.
Great. Okay, excellent. So I think the way that we recorded this, I'm totally happy with it the way it is, and are you okay with us, me just releasing it as it is, the way we recorded it?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Let me, before we head out, one last thing I want to do. I'm going to plug an event that I have coming up for multifamily investment property and wholesaling real estate. I'm just going to bring this screen over here for a second. You're probably not going to see this part because it's not a shared screen, but I'm just going to share this real quick with before we wrap it up. So if you go to Chabot and Associates Real Estate Group on Facebook and you scroll down, you'll see there's an event. Let's see. Let me go into events. Events. We have an event called Multifamily Flipping Wholesaling Meetup with guest speaker Walter Amarello, and it's going to be on November 4th at 5:30 p.m. And we can only have about 40 people show up at the event, and it's at 5:30 p.m. on Wednesday, November 4th. And we're going to have Walter, who's a local an author from New Bedford Fall River area in Massachusetts, and he wrote a book called Broke to $250,000. He's an interesting guy, and he does a lot of wholesaling. He's an investor himself. He's very accomplished. He's a younger guy, so it's always exciting to see these younger guys that have made a lot of progress. But I just wanted to share that with everybody before we wrap it up. That's the next event that we have coming along. My name is Anthony Chabot with Chabot & Associates Real Estate Group of EXP. If anybody has any questions, my number is 508-847-0902. My email address is anthonychabot@gmail.com. And I want to thank Jim Bellano, Economic Development Director for Windham, Connecticut, for being on the podcast one more time, Jim. And I will hopefully see you in the near future.
Absolutely. Tony, I appreciate it. I appreciate your kind words.
All right. Have a great day, Jim. Thank you.
Thank you.